for agreeing to come on my channel. I think this interview will be really exciting because I've had a lot of people over the years ask me when I mentioned that you previously worked in the music industry. So I've had a lot of people ask me over the years, like, what was your position? What did you do? And I really don't have a good answer. All I know is what I saw, which wasn't much.
Story begins before I was born. My father came to Cleveland on a scholarship for the Cleveland Institute of Music for voice. He was the major influence on my love of music. In fact, even to this day, I have CDs or albums in my collection that I can play that would kind of conjure up those memories and take me back to my early years when I was still living at home. I grew up on Miles Davis. I grew up on Ray Charles. Then the funny thing is, by the time I started collecting music before I moved out of the house, when I got ready to move, my father blocked the door and went through my albums and pulled out the ones he liked before I left. You know, that's where the love comes from.
Was there a certain genre of music that he preferred or seemed to prefer over another?
I can't say there was a particular genre because he liked Ray Charles, he liked Lou Rawls. He could sing just like Lou Rawls, in fact. He liked jazz, he liked Miles Davis, he liked Jimmy Smith. In fact, Jimmy Smith and him kind of favored. You know, if you ever saw a picture of Jimmy Smith, they could almost pass for brothers.
I just remember hearing a lot of jazz when I was little. So that's what I remember of your dad. I was here one day and I was walking down the street and I passed someone and I caught a whiff of a pipe. And it took me back to when I was a kid. It made me think of your dad.
I probably started generally around 17 or 18. I worked in a local neighborhood record store right around the corner from the house on Bel Air. Eventually, when I got out of high school, I started working downtown in Cleveland at a store called the Record Den, which was in McCrory's. And then I left from Record Den and I went to work at Record Rendezvous on Public Square. That was the place to be because it was right in the heart of downtown. I knew where all the parties were. And actually, Matthew and I had a party one time. People still talk about that party. We had an apartment over in East Cleveland on Euclid. We had so many people in and out of there. They were lined up on the street trying to get in, first of all. And after the party was over the next day, we had to wash the walls down from all the brown and black leather stains on the walls. When I left Record Rendezvous, I went back to work at McCrory's, this time as the manager. Then I went and worked for a couple of the one-stops, which was people who supplied small stores. From there, I went to work for the Sound Center in Warrensville. And then when I left the Sound Center in Warrensville, I went down to Columbus and helped put together the largest record store in Columbus, which was a black-owned store, also called the Sound Center. And
I remember that.
Yeah, I know you remember. You were down there.
Yeah.
And I left there. When I left there, I went to work for Atlantic Records. And
Atlantic.
That was in 1976, 77.
So Atlantic was your first job with a record label?
Yes. Well, by the time I had gotten that job, I had been working in retail stores and working in the one-stops for about 10 years. So I built up a lot of contacts. In fact, I didn't mention it, but I worked at a record distributor called Seaway. And one of the guys I worked with at Seaway was a guy named Willie Smith. And Willie Smith ended up being the Warner Brothers promotion man. He was the first black promotion man in the whole state of Ohio.
Aw, Willie.
And yes, the guy that was working for Atlantic had gotten a new position, and Willie had kind of been prepping me along the way. He asked me to pick up James Ingram and take him to WEWS Channel 5 for an interview. So that was my first experience working with the artists. Actually, I take that back, that was my second experience. My first experience, I was working in Columbus at the Sound Center, and Ashford and Simpson came by the store. I was the one that went and picked him up in the car and brought him to the store, and they signed autographs and kicked it with us for a while. And I took him back. And then the second experience was with James Ingram. After that, when the job came open for Atlantic, Willie kind of pulled me in. He's like my godfather in the record business. He got
I
me
always
in, and
liked Willie.
yeah, he got me in and he trained me. He was a real common sense kind of guy. He did such a good job with me that when he got out of the business and his son came in, I trained his son. Okay, and when I left Atlantic Records, I went to work for Mercury Records, which is part of Polygram. Polygram had a bunch of different labels. So I worked for Mercury Records. The guy that hired me was a former co-worker of Willie's that became national director of promotion for Polygram, for Mercury, I'm sorry. After being with them for a few years, they realigned everything, and they had one person carry all the records for all their labels. So those labels included Mercury Records, Polydor Records, Casablanca Records. We worked like all of those records. We had smaller territories then, but we had a lot more records to work. And then I stayed there for about 10 years. In fact, I was a senior person there. Then I got a call from a friend of mine. Well, before I even got in the record business, I used to buy records from him in downtown Cleveland in a place called Jupiter Records. I'm going to say I was probably about 15 when I met him. And I worked with him when I worked for Atlantic Records. And then he became senior vice president at Sony Music Epic Records. And he asked me to come and join his staff, and I did. And that was my most major position. I came in as regional director of promotion. As regional promotion manager. And eventually I became regional director of promotion. That took me up to 1994. And that's when I got out of the business. Well, I didn't get out of the business, but that's when I left the major labels. A guy in Cleveland had a small label he started and asked me to come and join his label. And I came in and became national director of promotion for him. That was around 1990. I want to say 1995, 96, and I stayed there until he closed the doors. Okay, when I was a local promotion man working for Atlantic Records, I had a territory of Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana, and I was responsible for getting the records on the radio and trying to get the rotation of, the more rotation means the more plays a week. And we had contests to enhance our record sales and things like that. Basically, when I left there, I went to Polygram. I became regional promotion man, and I picked up some territories and I lost some. Oh, I'm sorry. When I was with Atlantic, I also had Buffalo, Rochester, and Pittsburgh. So I had Buffalo, Rochester, Pittsburgh, Ohio, Kentucky, and Indianapolis when I worked for Atlantic. When I went to work for Mercury and Polygram, I started out, I had all of Ohio, Kentucky, Buffalo, Rochester, New York, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and the state of Michigan, which included Detroit, Flint, Saginaw. And basically I did the same job, just at a larger region. That's why I became a regional manager. And then I left, I went to Sony. Once again, my territory changed. I lost New York and I lost Michigan, but I had Ohio and Kentucky and Pittsburgh. And I did the same thing. And after I was there for a while, I got promoted from regional manager to regional director, which really just was an allowance for me to make a larger salary. But I basically did the same job on all the labels I worked for.
I remember standing backstage at concerts. I remember you used to go to the radio station, but what else did you like? Did you like have to beg people to play songs, or like what you do?
I wouldn't say beg, but over a period of time, you build a relationship with people. And, some of those people are still my friends today. Basically, based on the relationship, you come in, you wine and dine them, take them to dinner, whatever, and all that.
Who are you talking about you take out? Are you talking about the people at the radio station?
The radio station.
And then what was the extent of your contact with the actual artist?
If the artist was coming through on tour or on a promotional tour, I was the one that set up the interviews and took them around to the station. One time I had Angela Winbush and a guitar player named Doc Powell. Doc Powell, you might remember from Luther Vandross. Anyway, I had Angela and I had Doc Powell, And Angela's manager at the time was Ronald Isley, so I had him with me too. And I took them all through the state of Ohio and Kentucky, through the radio stations, and we had dinners and all kinds of stuff. She performed live on the air over an instrumental track. She sounded better live than she did on the record, in fact. And some of my oldest friends are some of the artists. Probably out of all the artists that I'd say were oldest friends is Patrice Rushen. Now I met Patrice Rushen in had to be 1975 or somewhere around there. I was still working at the Sound Center, and then a few years later, when I went to work for Atlantic Records, Elektra Records didn't have a staff, so they had me working at Atlantic Records and Elektra Records. And she got signed to Elektra. Her first 3 albums on Elektra, I promoted them as well. We also had Lenny White and a few other people that were signed to Elektra. First time I went on the road, I was covering a group called Chic. The lead singer from Chic is a girl named Norma Jean Wright, and she's from Elyria, Ohio. And we got to be good friends, and we still talk. But she's probably my best friend out of all the artists. Charlie Wilson's a good friend.
I was gonna ask, do you still talk to Renee?
Yeah, I talked to Renee a couple of months ago.
Okay.
I don't talk to Angela though. They came to Cleveland to do a concert, and Angela's a songwriter. Renee is a producer. So anyway, they were doing a show in Luke Easter Park, and kind of fell out on stage.
I remember. I was on the stage.
Yeah.
So I was terrified.
Oh, you kind of limited me to an artist, because I would say the most memorable for me was when I was working in the record den in downtown Cleveland, and the greatest, Muhammad Ali, walked in off the street and kicked you for half an hour. Outside of that, I would have to say between the Gap Band and Alex Bugnon, those 2 guys both had me ride on their tour bus with them from one city to the next. And I thought that was really cool. That was probably the coolest thing.
I don't know if you remember, we were hanging out with the Fat Boys.
Uh-huh.
Was it Buff? Is that his name? Yeah. Buff? Okay. Yeah. We were riding past Lake Erie, and he threw his pop out the window, and then it splattered on a person, like on the side, and the person rolled up, and it was like pop all over his. I had Salt-N-Pepa's new record, because I love Salt-N-Pepa, and Marky D was dating Peppa at the time, or either they had just broke up. And like he was like punching the album cover. They were really fun to hang out with. I think that they had performed maybe later with Salt-N-Pepa, because I remember I think Salt-N-Pepa's tour bus was robbed in downtown Cleveland. So I remember that too. I think we stepped on their tour bus. Java Ranks. I think maybe Bobby Brown was a part of that. And Whitney Houston was there, and she was pregnant with Bobby Christina at the time. And then after the concert, when we went back to the hotel with Shaba, all the groupies that came back, I was like amazed. It was in the 70s. I was really, really young. And I just remember being backstage and the people having on shiny outfits. And I could see the shiny gold and silver outfits from the back. Because, I often watched it from the back. And there's also another time, I think it was Roy Ayers and Patrice Rushen. Did they ever play together anywhere, like in concert?
They might have, but I don't remember.
I remember him on a xylophone, and I think she was there too.
Basically, the main thing I can say is things have really changed. I really don't know too many people that's doing that even anymore. It's probably harder to get in now than it was then. You got the intentional fortitude, and if you're persistent enough, you can probably get in. Nothing else I can really tell you except, it's more about the people's connections. If you got connections, then you can possibly, through your connections, get in. That's how I got in.
Well, another thing too, like today, people don't necessarily need a label to make it, which I never quite understood.
Well, video has a lot to do with that. When I first got into business, it wasn't about the video, it was about the actual what you could hear. You could be a big fan, you could sing. That's all that mattered. Nowadays, if you're a big fan, you're gonna have a hard time because video is like more important than it was back in those days.
That's really unfortunate because one of my absolute favorite singers is Kelly Price. I feel like Kelly was always judged on her physical appearance. So I mentioned this to someone the other day about how lovely her voice was, and he said the only thing I remember about her is people making fun of her size. Her size has nothing to do with her ability to sing.
I can name another person that falls in the same category,
Huh.
Jennifer Hudson. Well, I tell you, I started watching American Idol when they voted Jennifer Hudson off, because she was as good as anybody on there. And I think what got her off of there was because of her visual. It wasn't her voice. It was because she was big.
That was the thing about American Idol. It was always a double standard with what's his name?
Simon.
He would always comment on her size, but then when Ruben Studdard would come up, he'd be like, "Oh, the velvet teddy bear," and it was very like clear there was a bias. Why is it the velvet teddy bear with him? He always called him the velvet teddy bear, and then when she would come up there, he would criticize her weight all the time.
That's the way it is now. It was never always like that. It used to be what you could do on vinyl or on tape.
Or like Bobby Caldwell. I never knew Bobby Caldwell was Caucasian until like I moved to Florida and he was performing somewhere, and I was like, "What?" Because that didn't
Oh
matter to
yeah,
us. Well, they said they
he came.
hid his identity because they wanted black people to support him, and I'm thinking like black people didn't care; they were supporting him anyway. Like Tina Marie, we
Right.
saw what Tina Marie looked like, but nobody cared what she looked like. They liked her music. Black people don't care about that.
Mm-hmm. No.
Maybe now because they've made them care about it.
When we were black promotion people, we pushed the record all the way to the top of the charts, and we would hope that they would cross over
Hmm.
so the pop station would play it. But if you was a white artist, you didn't have that problem. You get played on black radio, and you get played on white radio too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Without trying to push and cross over, it was just automatically done.
Right. In a lot of cases, yeah. In this day and age, you'd have to spend some of this hard-earned money and go in the studio and record a variety of songs like I tried to do with your daughter. With your daughter, all her songs except for one were ballads. When you go to a record company to try and get a deal, they want to hear you do fast material as much as they want to hear you do slow material. But what she didn't understand is some people have hit records on songs they don't even like. The
Right.
OJs didn't like Backstabbers. And that's the one that opened the door for the OJs. When you go to the record companies, you gotta show variety. A lot of times artists don't know which songs are most marketable.
Tina Turner said she didn't like What's Love Got to Do with It.
Mm-hmm.
And that was probably one of her biggest,
Yeah,
if not her biggest hit.
right. It happens all the time.
Now, who would be the person to tell you, but no, this is a hit?
The A&R person, which is artists and repertoire, they're the person that basically it falls to. If they like you, they can get you signed. She signed Patra and she signed Chaba.
Chaba?
Yeah,
Yeah.
she signed both of them.
When Glenn had LL Cool J over his house,
Mm-hmm.
and the whole neighborhood went over there, but I was on punishment for doing something bad, and I couldn't answer the phone. So the next day at school, they were like, "Oh, you missed it, LL Cool J," and I was so mad. And they had pictures. It was like Tasha, Kurt, Glenn, LL Cool J, the whole neighborhood, and I was at home on punishment. Remember when like people used to call, and I would answer the phone and never give you the message?
Yeah, I do.
It wasn't that I didn't care; it's just I was a kid. I didn't remember. Like they were like, "Okay, take down this information," and I might write it down and just forget, or I didn't write it down, but I know a couple of times I think it was important. I have an eclectic taste in music, and
Mm-hmm.
I attribute that to you, but not just to you, because there were artists that mom liked that I also like too. But a lot of that came from just hearing things that you would play around the house, and like while some of my friends' parents were playing like Al Green and stuff like that, I listened to a lot of Funkadelic, Parliament, Function, like whatever you were interested in, that's the stuff
Mm-hmm.
that I end up loving. And
That's
my,
what the same thing with me and my father. When I got older, I'd buy some of the stuff that, like I think maybe his favorite album might have been The Sermon by Jimmy Smith or Miles Davis or Ray Charles.
I consider myself a little bit of a music snob. And if people don't have the same kind of taste or can't appreciate music the way that I appreciate that, I kind of like turn my nose up at them. Like if you only like rap, but you can't listen to like other artists, that's kind of like, ugh.
Well, the older you get, your taste kind of changes or it widens. I can understand why people like rap. That's the music they grew up on. But
Yeah, I still like it, but I like other stuff too.
right.
Do you have any last words that you would like to say about the music industry, or do you miss it? Do you miss the excitement of that career?
Well, I tell you, in one hand, I miss it. It was exciting, but for the good side, there's always the bad side. A lot of pressure and a lot of stress. From week to week, you getting your job threatened if you don't get this record on the radio and that kind of stuff. When I ended up losing my job with Sony, I lost my job because the guy that hired me lost his job. If he was still there, I'd still be there, even today. They let his contract run out and they just didn't renew his contract. All the time I was working for Sony, there was a guy there who was hating on me because I thought I was too old to be doing what I was doing. Even though he was gone, he had planted the seed. The guy that fired me didn't touch me as long as Hank was there. But once Hank was gone, he came and got me. He fired me, and he fired the girl in Dallas. About a month later, they fired him. Then I asked him, I said, "You know who you're talking to?" He said, "No." I said, "You fired me, you MF."
I had a pretty awesome upbringing, even though we had our rough moments. But overall, I appreciate it. I appreciate your presence in the home. I appreciate your hard work, and I appreciate the experiences that I had when I was able to attend those concerts with you and meet people. But
Mm-hmm.
thank you again, and I love you.
I love you too.
And
And despite all the rough times we went through, we still had a lot of good experiences, and now they'll be with me till I die.
oh, I want to hear that.